And we are live for the Conversations That Matter podcast, another unannounced live stream. And it's the end of a long day for me. I've been working on a lot of stuff, man. It's like putting different hats on during the course of the day. Some of you do that. And it's a blessing to be able to work from home sometimes because I can do that a little more flexibly. But I've sucked in a bunch of sawdust earlier. I was sanding some things upstairs. I'm installing this door. And let's just say in my house, it's built in 1920. It's a farmhouse. Nothing's even. So things that should take you half an hour end up taking you 3 or 4 or 5 hours, depending. So I was just doing that. But working through some stuff for the podcast as well. I started writing a piece this morning on Christian nationalism. And a take that I don't think, at least I haven't seen anyone else getting at, which, well, I won't tell you what it is. I don't want to give it away. I don't want someone else to steal my thunder on it. So that will be released, Lord willing, later this week. I'm probably going to submit it to the guys at American Reformer, see if they want to carry it. I don't know. We'll see what I do. But either way, you'll be hearing about it on this podcast for sure. So anyway, lots going on. I had a good weekend. I hope you had a good weekend. I still got like a cold or something, but it was good. We had temperatures last week in the 70s, if you can believe it, almost every day. And now this week it feels like November, but last week it felt like the summer. It was weird. And so it was awesome. I got to go scope out some hunting land, and let's see what else. I can't even remember now. Everything's a blur, but I just know it was good. And my wife and I know. There's this really good ice cream place called Holy Cow in Red Hook, New York. And it's too far away from me to go there often. I almost never go to Red Hook. I never have a reason to, but I had a reason 3 times this week to go to Red Hook. Twice because there's an archery shop there and I had to get my bow worked on. So I had to drop it off, pick it up. And then the third time because my wife said, you keep getting that Holy Cow ice cream every time you go up there. I want some. So we took a special trip yesterday just to get her some Holy Cow ice cream. And it is good. And it's the reason they call it Holy Cow is because there's Yankees paraphernalia and stuff in there. And I believe, at least this is the story I was told, is that was what Babe Ruth said all the time was Holy Cow. And so that's what they called it. But I used to think it was because it's ice cream and cows, but apparently not. Really good place. So if you ever get to Red Hook, New York, check it out. Anyway, let's go over some of the things we're going to do today in the podcast. There's so many things, and I just wrote down a bunch of stuff because I wasn't sure what I needed to cut out and what I needed to keep. But I was listening. I want to mention this before I forget. I was listening to another podcast before I jumped on this, and it was A.D. Robles, and he was talking about something that I thought was like a just amazing point that I had not considered. And it was on some content that I had covered. Bart Barber actually did an interview with 60 Minutes, a month and a half ago? 2 months ago? But I did a whole podcast about it, and I missed something so crucial, and A.D. Robles brought it up, and he was bringing it up in the context of talking about how stories affect us, and then the stories we're told about things influence the ways we think about things. And he used evolution as an example, and it's a laughable idea, Darwinian evolution, but yet it's treated seriously because he says we've been force-fed this story so often, even if we disagree with it, we don't think that we can be part of a respectable society if we treat it with too much disdain or laugh at it too much. And I thought, well, that's a really good point. And it reminded me of something actually critical race theorists in particular say that stories are so important for their narrative. In fact, that's why they guard the idea that the killing of the death of George Floyd, the death of so many of these other victims, sometimes allegedly, is because of police misconduct, of racism in police departments, systemic racism in the United States. They have to guard that. And if you challenge it, they just want to destroy you. They don't want to argue with you because that particular story, that narrative, is crucial for them to get their political way. Without that narrative, they don't really have anything. So stories are important. So A.D. said, Bart Barber told a story. And I was thinking back, I'm like, what story is he talking about? He goes, Bart Barber, in the interview with Anderson Cooper, I think it was Anderson Cooper, on 60 Minutes, said that the Southern Baptists, or not even Southern Baptists in particular, but Christians actually, more broadly speaking, when they get a hold of political power, they end up persecuting everyone. And he said, well, that's a story he's telling. That's the worst advertisement for Christianity you can possibly give. You're telling everyone that this religion, it's so great, you should accept it, it's the truth. But once you're in power with this religion, you're just going to persecute everyone. It's terrible. And isn't that a lame story? Isn't that a story that if everyone believed it, of course they're not going to, if they're Christians, going to touch political power. Of course they're going to be suspicious of it. Of course they're going to think that anyone who says we should rally for political power so we can enact just laws, they should be looked at with some ire, because they might actually bring in the nightmare that Bart Barber is worried about. And I thought, wow, that's a good point. And it reminded me of when I was at Southeastern, because when I was a seminary student there, in seminary, Southern Baptist Seminary, I remember thinking, man, if half the things about Christianity I hear that I hear in class, if they're true, and from their blogs and just from the milieu, just everything there, I wouldn't want to be a Christian, because they give the impression Christianity is responsible for everything, from the Crusades to the Holocaust to slavery to repression of women and burning witches and divine right of kings and whatever arranged marriages. It's all barbarism, and it's Christianity's fault for supporting these things. And aren't you glad in the last 5 minutes, good old Danny Aiken and Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, we got it right. We're the biblical ones. And I was studying for a book, Social Justice Goes to Church, which you can get on Amazon. You can also go to worldviewconversation.com and get it. And it was part of the research that went into that I used for my thesis in grad school. And it struck me that I saw the same thing coming out with evangelical leftists of the 1960s. They say the same thing. They say that they're the true Christians. They're the only ones to have rightly rediscovered or conserved true Christianity. Anabaptists tend to say this. There's just a fundamentalists tend to say this. And these leftist evangelicals, though, inherited this, and boy, did they inherit it, because they really see themselves as so different. There's a big chasm between them and other Christians. Even if they say they believe the same doctrinal things, they will say, well, you don't really have the full gospel. You're not really a true Christian. You're over there somewhere. We're the ones that are conserving true New Testament Christianity. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting point AD made, and I thought, wow, that's a point that I need to echo. I need to just go check out his last video. It's really good on this, because it's something that I think, especially if you're a parent or if just you're a pastor or a teacher, it's something to consider. What stories are you telling people who are impressionable, especially kids, most especially? What are you telling them? What things are they going to believe? And are you self-aware of the things that you're telling them? So anyway, wanted to mention that. That's a shout out for AD, because I thought it was just a really good video. A few announcements on my end before we get started. We're going to talk about Al Mohler. We're going to talk about, what else are we going to talk about? A bunch of stuff. TGC article. We're talking about the elections. How's everyone feeling about that? By the way, I should check this out. I've been looking at the updates, and I don't know if they've called it in Arizona or not. I know election, it's like election month. It's not even election day anymore. It's just so ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, they're saying, I guess there's supposed to be a vote drop in Arizona, and it looks like Carrie Lake isn't going to make it, supposedly, even though, it looked so promising and polls had her way ahead. And it's weird to some of you who have not perhaps come to grips with 2020. But if you've come to grips with what happened in 2020, I could have told you, right? A lot of people could have told you this is what they're going to do. I think the question maybe for some of you was, is what they're going to do going to be enough to overcome the votes that Carrie Lake got for governor of Arizona? And that's perhaps the question. But look, I can't get into it too much on YouTube, unfortunately, but just read between the lines, do your homework. That's all I got to say. It's not a huge shock, unfortunately. What's the solution, John? What's the solution? Well, there's not an easy one, not a political one that's easy, at least. All right, so anyway, we'll talk a little bit maybe about the election. Got some other stuff pulled up, some updates on Grove City College and on Will McCraney's case. So lots of good stuff for you today. But before we get to all that, though, just a few announcements. Organizing a conference. I just want to let you know that I am starting to consider the possibility of organizing a conference. And I'm very aware of the fact that this could be a lot of work, and I've got a lot of things I'm doing next year, a lot. So I'm trying to figure out the best way strategically to get this done. But I just want to let you know, for those especially who are supporters, that I'm thinking about this. And I had a good conversation with Judd Saul the other day, and he's willing to do a lot of the legwork. And so we are thinking of doing something maybe in Dallas. We're thinking of central locations that people can get to, but it wouldn't be me. It would be like me and 20 of my friends, right? It would be it would probably be a big, or a big tent, I guess, for lack of a better term, with maybe different denominations, but it would be all people who are courageous, Christians who are courageous, that's the idea, at least the concept at this point is courageous Christians, and not like these knockoff courageous Christians conferences you see. I know I've seen them. I've seen a bunch of them, by the way. And they always have that name, courageous Christians, or something like along those lines, taking a stand. And then you look at the people that are at these conferences, and most of them, maybe some of them have, but most of them, they've been talking heads for a long time. And maybe I'm a talking head, but my point is, what risks have they had to endure over the last few years? What kinds of deprivations have they suffered because of the fact that they believe in what the Bible teaches on ethics or something related to that? And most of them, you have to say, they're not. They're elites on the other side, and there's a poser kind of thing going on. They're posing as courageous Christians. Maybe some of them are, but it's not been tested. And I had this idea for a while. I really want to do something with guys who have been tested, guys who have really gone through the ringer, been canceled, who've just really shown, maybe they're not part of the in crowd, but they've really shown courage, and they've really moved the needle. And I got so many names in my head of people that would be great for this. So anyway, just want to let you guys know that. And hey, if there's people out there who have ideas for cancel-proof venues, it's important to me. I want to, venues got to be cancel-proof in my mind. And whether it's your church or a community center or something, you got the connection, then I would love to hear from you. But I am looking at places, especially in the Southeast. So all the way from South Carolina all the way to Texas, somewhere in there, and maybe as north as Tennessee. I don't know if I want to go much farther north. And part of it is I go there for film things sometimes that I haven't really been there to speak all that much. And I was looking at I don't ever do this. I did it for the first time the other day. I was looking at my YouTube stats, and most of the people who listen to the podcast or at least a lot of them, at least, they're in those sections, they're in those states, they're in those cities, which I suspected. And there's a reason I think that most of my invites are in the Midwest. And I think it's because if you're in the South, especially, there's churches everywhere. And if you were to really take this issue head on, if you're really, especially have someone like me come, or AD, or someone who's really named names and so forth, you're risking it. You're upsetting the apple cart. And you're not just doing that, but you are in danger of damaging potential relationships with other pastors in your community. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true, but I was trying to think what makes sense of this. And there's Southern Baptists everywhere down there too. But so I'm thinking maybe next year doing a few smaller events. Definitely, we got to do a men's retreat. It was phenomenal what happened a few weeks ago. But I want to do something for everyone, and I think maybe a central location, like a kind of, for next year at least, would be optimal. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you updated on that. And it is the time of year, once again, for, you know what I'm going to say. Everyone knows Gold River tea. In fact, I've got my Gold River tea in my Conversations That Matter mug right here. And I'm drinking some chamomile herbal tea, spearmint and lavender flavor. It's really good. Actually, it really is, actually. I'm not just saying that. And you got to leave the bag in the tea. That's how you drink it. But you go to online, just go to goldriverco.com, and you can get yourself some Gold River tea. They got a bunch of bundles. If you click on their front page, they'll show you their Christmas trio bundle. Makes a great gift. And this is a company that supports what you believe. It supports. These are people like us. So pro America, pro Western Civ, pro Christianity, most importantly, against cancel culture. You can go and check out their other bundles. They got a bunch of different kinds here. And If you go to their seasonal, you'll find their pumpkin spice and their hot cocoa. In fact, I don't have the hot cocoa, but actually no, I think I have it, and I haven't tried it yet. That's what I'm saying. I haven't tried the hot cocoa yet, but they have a cinnamon spice hot cocoa, and I am very curious about this because I'm not a big hot chocolate guy, if you can believe it. I like mint hot chocolate. I'm weird, I know. But I'm wondering if I would like cinnamon spice. But they have that, which is just an interesting combination there. But go to Gold River Trading, goldriverco.com, and on the checkout, put in the promo code CONVERSATIONS to get yourself some 15% off for your order. That's goldriverco.com, and don't forget Conversations. All right, well, let's see who's streaming with us today, and we'll keep going here and get into some of the meat of this podcast as we go. Wow, there's a lot of 72 people streaming, and it's 7:38 p.m., so I'm assuming in the next few minutes we'll probably even get some more. Hello, Gordon Sanchez's older brother. What makes you think I'm Gordon Sanchez's brother? That's interesting. I hope he talks about the effects of wokeism on independent fundamental Baptists. Man, I don't know where to start with that exactly. It's I know there have been effects on independent fundamental Baptists, but it's a very hard thing to trace because they're independent fundamental Baptists. That's why. You don't have a denomination making official statements about things. You have to go like church by church. That'd be a very difficult study. It just will be long, but you could definitely do it. You could go to some of their institutions that a lot of them will use, like a Bob Jones perhaps. And yes, I've had people communicate with me about Bob Jones and tell me, just like everywhere else, there are places in which this ideology is creeping in. But it's not anything that's, from what I've been sent at least, it's nothing that's like so specific you can really put your finger on it. And it doesn't seem, to me, it doesn't sound like it's pervasive, but it's there. And so I tell people, just be aware of it. Anywhere you go, just be aware of it. All right, well, we are going to jump into some things here, and we'll come back. If anyone has a question, if cries of outrage, anyone has anything to share, you can put it on the live chat, and I will be sure to at least try to check out what people are saying. All right, well, let's start here with election stuff, shall we? It's probably the best place to start. And an article that came out before the midterms from the Gospel Coalition. And the question that is asked here is, what can pastors do about political division? What can they do? With November 5th is when this came out. And obviously, timing is not, it's because the midterms are coming. That's why this article came out, obviously. And we'll just kind of go through it here. Midterm elections are around the corner. For many pastors, this time of year brings up fear and dismay. Pastor recently told me a congregant came to him to say he couldn't stay at the church because he had different political views. Now, let me stop right there. Didn't bring fear and dismay for my pastor. Didn't bring fear and dismay probably for some of your pastors. What would cause a pastor to have fear and dismay? They're going to lose congregants. They're going to have to be forced to take a side on something. It's going to sow seeds of division at their church. And it doesn't have to be that way. And if you're trying to keep a church together where you have people of fundamentally different ethical views, because that's what it requires at this point. In our national conversation, even on local matters at this point, the divide is so deep. There was a time you could be a Democrat and a Christian. I will admit this, as far as you could be consistent in your ethics for the most part. And there was a way to. Now the chasm is so deep and wide. I don't see how it's possible to do that. It's just, there may be a Democrat here or there, especially it would have to be, I guess, on a local level, that you could say, well, they're out of step with the rest of the Democratic Party, maybe in some rural southern areas or something. But the party, the main disagreements that we have today are over very fundamental issues, and they're not issues most of the time. Well, I would say just about every time today. They're social issues that the Bible's not silent on. So a pastor who's afraid of that is trying to sidestep that, transcend that, make sure that the apple cart isn't upset, their feathers aren't ruffled. that kind of a pastor is probably not the kind of pastor that you want to be following. I'm just going to say, because that's someone who's more committed to keeping the church as an institution of this world functioning smoothly than they are about actually making disciples, applying the principles of the kingdom of God, of Christian ethics, to matters of discipleship. That's my 2 cents on this, because it doesn't have to be this way, and not every pastor is like this. But they're making this kind of universal sounding claim that this is when pastors get afraid. I heard still another story of a pastor who left his church because the political division was overwhelming. Most of you know similar stories. The politics pandemic has hit the church in a unique way in the last 6 years. Really, TGC. I mean, if only we knew why that would be. Is there like a major Christian blog or publication that keeps pushing things, especially to the left, and trying to influence pastors and church leaders to conceive of politically left issues as justice issues? I wonder if only I knew the answer to that question. A recent Lifeway survey indicated 63% of pastors are frequently overwhelmed by stress, and one of the most consistent stressors is political division. Okay, so here's the solution. You ready? Here's what TG says you ought to do. Right? They said, I'm sure they're going to say, figure out what the Bible says about the issues and preach the full counsel of God so your people are discipled into stewarding their vote well when they get into that voting booth. Is that what they say? Oh, no, that's not what they say. Remind Christians of their first loyalty. The most important thing church leaders can do is remind people of their first loyalty to Jesus and his church. We must remind Christians that our faith is political at its core, so we can be neither private nor partisan. Neither private nor partisan. Okay. In our day, it's become a truism to say Jesus didn't come with a political message. The common trope goes like this. Though Israel expected a warrior king to come riding on a white horse to overthrow Rome, he instead came out with a spiritual message about their hearts. Jesus simply wants a relationship with you. The problem is, this is a half-truth. When Jesus came, he made a political announcement. And this is, by the way, TGC, I've described them as neo-Kuyperian. And it's a very vague, broad Kuyperianism of sorts. It's a Richard Mao type of Kuyperianism. It's Tim Keller's Kuyperianism. They want, it's the every square inch thing, but they want they're still very suspicious of political power, of Christians getting involved in that. So Christian nationalism, no bueno. But at the same time, the way that they apply this common grace and the way that God's sovereign reign is that through the institution of the church, Christians are to infiltrate and influence every single, whether it's the arts, whether it's politics, media, academics. They're supposed to influence every single institution of society. And so it's a weird fusion in my mind, because that really wasn't, like, Kuyper literally started, or was part of starting, a Christian political party. So when they say here, well, we can't be partisan, well, that would exclude Kuyper. But it's a weird, and I don't know if it's, I've wondered if there's like a weird Anabaptist like mix going on here, where, because Anabaptists very much conceive of the church as outside the world, and it's viewing the world objectively, creating this counterculture over here, kind of. And TGC seems to be very much about that. But the difference is, with Anabaptists, they don't think of themselves as infiltrating the world. They're like very separate. So TGC kind of wants this like bird's eye view. We're over here in the church, but we're going to infiltrate all these places. And when a Christian steps out of line and starts saying, I'm not here to influence by representing the church primarily. I want to be here as someone who actually wields political power, gets elected into the office, and then does so for the sake of Jesus. And I'm going to, like you just saw, was in Oklahoma, the new governor proclaimed, he said it was outside of Kuyperian, every square inch, right? But it doesn't have to be, but the way he said it, every square inch of Oklahoma, he dedicated to Jesus. That's when they start to get uncomfortable. It's like, no, you're supposed to be a good witness, you're supposed to be winsome. So anyway, it's not surprising me that they're saying this, but it says Jesus came as a king, so we have one ruler. Here we go. To whom we owe our loyalty. Many think Jesus is king merely means he is Lord of my life. We forget Jesus is more. He's the King of Kings. King over this world's political divisions. No other loyalty comes first for Christians. We're part of the city and kingdom of followers from around the world that he's forming. So the most politically active thing church leaders can do each week is remind people Jesus is king. Okay, that's really good. It's a really good broad statement. I mean, of course, they say things that in this that I'm like, the only one to whom we owe our loyalty. I mean, would you say that to a kid? Like, you don't owe your loyalty to anyone but Jesus. Or to a wife, you don't owe your loyalty to anyone. Like, no. No, the spiritual reality doesn't erase the natural hierarchies and obligations that we have on this earth at all. So you owe your loyalty to more than just to Jesus exclusively. In fact, to these other in these other hierarchies in which you operate and live, it's part of your duty to Jesus to give loyalty and express your duty to these other institutions. Number 2, disciple them in the political realm. Our people need teaching related to politics. Now let's see where this goes, because remember I said this would be my solution, right? And I don't think TGC goes there, but so the question in my mind would be like, how specifically, how broadly? You remember the rules. You can't be partisan according to this article. That's a no-no. So you want to make sure that the apple cart isn't ruffled too much, but you're still supposed to somehow disciple them into politics. So how do you do that? Our people need teaching related to politics. This might come as a shock. Aren't we supposed to de-elevate politics in our congregations? Some might say this is precisely the problem. We need to focus more on the gospel. We need to teach more on the unity God has called us to. But I wonder if people are divided over politics because we've neglected to teach them how to have political discussions. Okay, there it is. It's not... They're going to locate. I knew they would do this. They're going to locate the issue. It's not, the issue isn't fundamentally an ethical issue. Man, you got some people thinking wrong ethically over here. They're wrong. They're just wrong. The Bible says this. They are doing this. They are believing this. So you need to correct that. That's not what they're saying. They're saying they're looking at the problem here. No, the problem is more surface level. The problem is we don't know how to have political discussions. So it's not that we're confused over the political positions we should have. It's that we can't even we can't even have a discussion about it. And so we need more civility, we need more winsomeness and all that. I asked a few pastors who've had problems, it says, with politics in their churches, what they wish they would have done differently. A few said the same thing. They wish they'd have been quicker to disciple people towards knowing about politics and stewarding ethics. And nope, it says in personal conversations. So our conversational skills are really bad. That's what it is. We're not using our library voices. And that's really causing problems. And so this isn't really discipleship. This could be part of it, but at the crux of the issue, the reason that churches are dividing in the last few years especially, isn't because they forgot how to have conversations all of a sudden. You know, did all the Christians know how to have conversations? I mean, pretty much. Like, they were better at conversations. And then all of a sudden in 2020, like, they all decided we don't know how to talk anymore. I don't think that was the issue. I don't think it was they needed an English lesson or even a lesson in manners necessarily. Some might, but the big picture here is there was an opportunity to expose the actual belief some people held privately. Now they're coming out publicly. And so I think the fracture was already there. For some, they were convinced. They were taking positions they had not taken before. I saw this with people that I knew for years that I thought, well, they never fall for Marxism, and they're posting black squares in 2020. They're putting on the mask. They're doing the whole thing. And I'm like, where did this come from? Well, obviously their position changed on things, or they might think my position changed, which it didn't, but their position changed. And so to use our library voice isn't going to fix this. It says we tend to forget people are already being discipled. Or here it goes. Cable news outlets and the larger culture train people in politics of rage. Pastors need to be ready to shift the direction of a negative conversation. Reminds me of the Christian radio station near me. Today's positive sound. That's our Christians should be the upbeat. And yes, in a sense, we have a hope. But here's the thing: there's some things you should be outraged about, have a righteous indignation about, and it's not wrong to have righteous indignation. If they're doing drag queen library hour in your town, they've been killing babies for how many years, depending on the state you live in, and there's hardly any states have actually outlawed abortion. I don't know if any actually have completely. There's some that have talked about it, but that's been going on for years, obviously. with how do I say it? Issues of election, maybe integrity. Should I say that? Other issues that, I mean, there's so many of them now. There's a lot that I think we would do well to be upset about in a righteous way. How do you be angry and yet do not sin? So, number 3, be a non-anxious presence. We can lead congregants to be a non-anxious presence in a turbulent sea of indignation. The culture of the church usually follows the lead of its pastors. Let's see, be cheerful and encouraging. And I agree with this one, actually. Yeah, I think you do need to, I mean, not Pollyanna, but you definitely need to be encouraging, and it's very hard to. So being a cheerful warrior can be difficult, and I feel that. I definitely do. Often our people need an example to show them what it looks like to navigate the issues in our day. Level head. Okay, so yeah, I would agree with that one. Number 4, be clear where the Bible is clear. All right. So political interpretation of the Bible is fraught with complications. How about this, TGC? How about a biblical interpretation of politics? Can we do that? Instead of a political interpretation of the Bible, let's do a biblical interpretation of politics. Christians disagree with each other about politics because the Bible seems to be giving diverging impulses. The Bible is a story, not an answer book for political policies. We don't have a systemic, but you have principles, guys. Acknowledge it. How do Christians approach governmental systems? How should the budget? I'll tell you how Christians approach governmental systems. We have examples in Scripture. How about centralized authority in the form of a king? Not the best. Here's the trade-off. You're going to be taxed. Your sons are going to go to war. So do you really want that? I mean, you can have it. Judges, not so good of an example. Everyone doing what's right in their own eyes. The free market, if it's just, I know people are going to jump down my throat. John, the free market, we're not. I know. I'm for the free market. But if you don't have any, if it's just anarchy, let's say, like everyone might is right, doesn't work either, right? We know that. We have examples in Scripture. We have the experience of Scripture as a guide to us, frankly. So what should the budget look like? Well, the budget's going to reflect the values that you have, the things that you prioritize as a people. What kinds of things should you prioritize? Human life should be up there, right? Like protecting it, like punishing criminals. Like that's part of the government's job. If it's not that, and you're going to welfare, and the Bible says if you don't work, you shouldn't eat, how should we think about that? I mean, I'm already just off the top of my head coming up with a way to approach this. How should a nation deal with immigration? Well, there were laws in the Old Testament about aliens and sojourners and how to treat them. And by the way, they didn't immediately they weren't aliens and sojourners anymore because they crossed a border. And that certain cities did have walls around them. So there were borders in that sense. So there was, people knew who the alien and the sojourner were. Some stories seem to imply one answer and some commands seem to imply another. Many pitfalls confront interpreters, and it's easy to read our own prejudices into the text. So the emphasis of this whole thing is it's so complicated. This would intimidate anyone. If it's so complicated, who am I to try to approach such a complicated question? I'd like to suggest to you all, it's not actually as complicated as you think. A lot of the issues presented today aren't all that complicated. Maybe the mechanisms for in a country of our size to administer policies would be complicated, but the moral principles involved, not that complicated. It's not easy to respect the difference between Old Testament political life and New Testament political life. I don't think it's that. I mean, let me put it this way. If you were outside of Israel in the Old Testament, so you weren't a Jew, and you were trying to figure out, how do I set up a government? Where would you look? What example? I was just reading about Solomon this morning. I literally was reading this morning about Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Guess where she went? She went to Solomon. It's working for you. The law of God was to be a light to the nations. So does that mean every single thing every single ceremonial law? That not necessarily, no. But what does it mean? The character of God is revealed in the principles, the moral principles that constructed the political laws of the nation of Israel, and that's something that was supposed to be applicable. That wisdom is applicable universally. That doesn't mean, and by the way, I got to be very careful how I say this. It doesn't mean that every law is suited for every era and every region. It means the principles in them. General equity, that's what the Westminster Confession says. I would be there, a general equity kind of guy. That it's there's going to be certain outworkings of moral principles that are suited for differently in different places. But the moral principles are steadfast. They remain the same. They're universal. All right. A pastor told me about how a congressman once asked Washington, D.C. Pastor Mark Dever how he should vote on a budgetary issue. Dever told the pastor he had strong opinions on the issue, but the Bible wasn't clear on the topic, so he simply said, "I will pray for you." He wanted to reserve his pastoral authority for matters where scriptures are clear. Here's... Now, I don't know what the issue was. So maybe it is an issue where it's like, man, I really don't know about this. But shouldn't your pastor be able to give you something better than that? I'm going to pray for you. At least, even if it's not a completely well fleshed out answer, shouldn't a pastor be able to give you some kind of moral authority on a moral question, if that's what it is? Now, he's not giving me enough information to know exactly what the question is, so I can't really weigh in too much. But I wouldn't put this story in there as a point in my corner. Like this is what you're supposed to do. This is a success story. No, I wouldn't say that's a success story. It's good that Mark Dever prayed for this guy, but I remember when I was in Washington, D.C. in 2020, I think it was. Yeah, 2020. There was I'm trying to remember. I think it was spring of 2020. There was a protest. It was, it was during the Amy Coney Barrett stuff. Was that? No, so it couldn't have been 2020. It must have been 2019. Anyways, I was in D.C., and there was a guy there protesting against the pro-lifers. And I started talking to him, and turns out he attended Mark Dever's church. He's a Christian, because I said, well, I'm a Christian. That was one of my, I'm against abortion. I believe life starts at conception, that God wants us to protect life. And he was, well, I'm a Christian. I said, you're a Christian, really? I'm very concerned about Donald Trump's racism and this and that. And I'm personally against abortion, but I think that it should be legal. And when I got into it with him, like I asked him very specifically, where do you go to church? And, he goes to Capitol Hill Baptist Church, and he had been there for a while. And at this point, it was, see now, I'm really going back and forth in my mind on whether this was 2020 or 2019. I'm gonna have to go look it up, but because I want to say that they were shut down for COVID. But see, my mind might be blurry on those details, but it is definitely not blurry on this detail. The guy definitely went to Capitol Hill Baptist, and I remember it as clear as day, him telling me that the Republicans' racism was just he said it was even more. It was even more damaging and disturbing than was the Democrats' position on abortion. So it's like, I'm not saying Mark Dever told him that. I don't think so, but it's this position that we need to be so neutral that we can't ever take these stands, or people have to do a lot of digging to figure out what we believe, is kind of shameful for a pastor. This stuff is so basic. People should know. Not that you're politically doing political sermons every week, but in general, when you make application, there's tons of examples today that you can make application from if you're going through a passage exegetically. And people are going to know that pastor is against abortion or whatever the issue is. All right. Church leaders are the first line of defense in political discipleship. Yeah, well, some defense that was. The culture will attempt to train our people, but the church is meant to be an alternative society that presents a new way of life. See, bingo. That's what I said earlier. The church is an alternative society that presents a new way of life. That's the winsomeness. That's the trying to beckon people to, hey, look at us. Look how good we have it here. If we walk in faithfulness, this too will be part of our public witness, the unity we display. Okay, so I would like to suggest another way of approaching this. And that is this. Know what the Bible says, first of all. Be able to apply it to the topics of the day. Ethical topics, political topics. And then teach your people, if you're a pastor, how to apply those things, how to steward your vote well. And if there's any political authority that anyone in your congregation has, how to steward that authority well. And that is a much superior and a much more life-changing and a much more, I think, I was going to say gospel protecting, but I know people are going to read into that the wrong thing. It's a much better way to assist the proclamation of the gospel when magistrates do what is right on the local level or the national level. It's a much better thing for the church in general too, when magistrates uphold the law of God. That's the root thing that's used to convict people of their sin, is the law of God on their hearts. And so if you denigrate the law of God, and the government does that and sets the tone for that, then that has an effect. All right, well, that's TGC and their unhelpful article, and I figured I would just go through that with you. Much more to get to. We got 107 people streaming right now, and Biden Fetterman 2024. Someone wrote on yes, Biden Fetterman 20. That would be the funniest. And I mean, look, I don't want to see our country go downhill any more than it already is, but I mean, Biden Fetterman, that would be. They wouldn't be able to construct a sentence between the two of them. It would be very interesting. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of you relating to this whole idea that the church must transcend these politics, that the pastor's job is to somehow be neutral on these things. So, yeah, I've been in a lot of churches like that. I visited a lot of churches over the last 4 years, and I run into that all the time. That is the default setting in a lot of churches. But there are churches, and there's a lot of them actually, that probably not as many at all. But there are churches out there that are solid that aren't like that, just so you know. DiscerningChristians.com. That's where you can go and find some of them, Lord willing. Okay, any other questions here? Mostly just good observations from people. Yes. Yep, Matthew 22, Christ, yeah, absolutely. Christ lived in imperial Rome. And not just imperial Rome. Christ lived in an empire, Roman Empire, but he also lived in a nation. He lived in the nation of Israel. And there were local leaders. There were also national leaders. And he did give us a template for how to interact. I don't think what Christ was doing was showing people how to, in his example at least, how to run a government, because that wasn't his purpose. His purpose was to seek and save the lost. But he endorses the rest of Scripture, which does give us what we're supposed to be applying. Okay, let's see. What other things here? Let's see. Yeah, what's up? All right, we're going to move on a little bit and talk about, let's see, where are we going to go from here? I think what I'd like to do, we're going to get into some total depravity stuff from Stephen Wolfe's book. I think that's probably the next thing. That'll probably be the best thing to do next before we get to Al Mohler and that stuff. Let's start here. This is a tweet from a guy. Many of you may not even know who this guy is, but his name's Neil Shenvi. He has what does he have? He has a website, and I thought some of the things that he's posted about critical race theory can be helpful in just describing it in the past. I've had disagreements over how he applies his critique of critical race theory, because he goes to J.D. Greer's church, and he's in the Southern Baptist Convention, and he's run cover for some of the guys in that convention who I think who have pushed at least critical race theory stuff. So we're similar in the sense that I think we're both against critical race theory, different in the sense that I would say that it's happening in the SBC, and I would call out the names of here's where it's happening. And I think he would disagree with me on that, but we'll put it this way: a guy that would be known for, I think, in the popular Twitter world, if you want to call it that, people who follow this kind of stuff, I think they would say that we're on the other side. We're on the conservative side of being against social justice, etc. That's what people would say, probably, right? So this isn't like a critique of a hardened social justice warrior type who is, trying to rip down the patriarchy or anything like that. And it's not even really a critique of him, but he brought it up, and then the comments are really what I was interested in. All these comments. Okay, this is what he brings up, and it's not social justice. I could probably connect it, but it's not really related. It's from Stephen Wolfe's book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, and he quotes him on page 22, which is the introduction. He's been doing a lot of quotes of Stephen Wolfe's book. He's reading through it, he's quoting it. And if you go to page 22, The Case for Christian Nationalism, here's what it says. And I'm going to read for you here what he posts. The fall of man placed man in a state of sin. The state of sin, or total depravity, is misunderstood even in Reformed circles. The fall's principal effect concerned man's relationship to God and the promised heavenly life, for it removed man's highest gifts, those which drew him to heavenly life. Man retains his earthly gifts, those that lead him to the fundamental things of earthly life, such as family formation and civil society. Thus, man still has his original instincts and still knows the principles of right action, which incline him to do what is good. But the loss of his heavenly orientation affects his whole being, such that he sins not only in relation to God, but also toward his fellow man. The question is, what is the extent of discontinuity from prelapsarian or pre-fall Adam? And he goes on with this, and so he says, he's making the point that civil government it's not introduced because of the fall of man, which is a very common view. In fact, I think, isn't that what Thomas Paine believed? We wouldn't even have government if men were angels. You wouldn't need it. And Stephen Wolfe is saying, no, that's not true. Government is, even in its perfect state, there would be government. And after the fall, that template or that purpose for government, that plan for government, that didn't go away. That's still there, and it's still possible for people, even those who are not Christians, to pursue political good, essentially. Now, here's what Neil takes from this, because he quotes it. He just quotes this. This is all he quotes. Total depravity is misunderstood even in Reformed circles. Man still has his original instincts and still knows the principles of right action, which incline him to what is good. Now, I see a big problem here with the way this is being quoted, in that it's not wrong to quote. Obviously, you'd have to quote. People sometimes get on to me, John, you're taking things out of context, and I always say, look, show me, because I'm open to that. If I miss something, if I'm leaving something that's fundamental or important to understand out, then let me know. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to summarize. We're trying to get to what's the kernel of truth here. What's the thesis? What's being argued here? And this is not really what Stephen's arguing. This is the icing. What Stephen's arguing, the cake, is that government is a good thing, that man, even fallen man, still has the capacity to participate in. All right? So Neil takes, and he chops up this quote, and he just makes it sound very general, that man still has his original instincts and still knows the principles of right action, which inclined him to what is good, without any explanation. Now, this isn't like a huge thing. This isn't like a big deal the way he quoted it, I guess. I should say that. It's not huge, but it may, I'm being nitpicky perhaps, I don't know. But it is a problem in my mind. So, I think maybe I said it was a big problem before. So I'm going to retract that if I said that. It's not a big problem, but it's definitely, it's not helpful for the purpose of understanding. It's not a helpful way to communicate when you're leaving out, I think, what his main point is. And the rest of the book is going to tell you what instincts are, what right action is, what a lot of the stuff that he's quoting is. So here's what happens. It blows up with people, and Neil's part of this, I guess. He keeps asking people, that like people hear someone defending Stephen, standard, fair, reformed orthodoxy, and then Neil says that humans beings are inclined towards the good, or that God's law is written on their hearts, points is towards the good. I botched that, didn't I? That human beings are inclined toward the good, or that God's law written on our hearts points is toward the good. No, I didn't. That's the way he phrased it. Here's another one. Let's see. Well, there was a bunch of them. Now I'm not seeing them all. But anyway, what happened was there was people that were, there was a divide. People were just weighing in on this. And many were just saying, like, this is not Reformed theology. This is not total depravity. And I would normally not weigh in on something like this on Twitter. It's not a tweet that got a lot of traction. It's not. But it made me think of something. Because someone sent this to me, and I just immediately thought, that has been a problem for years, I think. And I think that a lot of it's related to the two kingdoms thing. So, I'm going to read for you a section from the Case for Christian Nationalism, because he's quoting from the introduction here. If you read up to the actual section, which it's not even that much farther, it's page, what page is it? think it's on page 40. Or no, 40. Let's do this. It's going to be easier for me. I think I had my finger in the wrong spot. I'm going to pull it up on Kindle. And yeah, I'm going to pull it up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can show you live here. Let's see. So that you can read along with me. That'll make it more interesting than just me reading here. Kindle. All right. We have Kindle up now. So here's this section. And it does say, oh, page 81. So it's definitely not page 40. No wonder I had my finger in the wrong spot. So it's the section on total depravity. So this is where Stephen actually fleshes this out. And I want to read this to you. So I really do think that this has been a problem for years. Within the new Calvinism movement, I think has ultimately, I just noticed a tendency for people to get this wrong for some reason. And it's created, I think, all kinds of problems, potentially at least, where people are thinking that they have to be, here we go, you can see me now, where people are feeling like they're in the pit all the time, that there's totally depraved, which means that there's just nothing whatsoever, there's nothing good in them. And I understand when I sing or when we say there's nothing good in I'm going to flesh this out. I'm going to make the distinction in a minute here. But I think that there's a tendency in the new Calvinism, if you want to call it that people involved in that think of this as such an absolute thing, total depravity, and such a pernicious thing that there's literally nothing within man that is, even on a design level, there's nothing good in man. There's just nothing. And so I've just seen this create struggles even in my own heart, because I used to, I think, be more along this line of thinking, that that any inclination I have, any desire that exists, any instinct is the word Stephen uses here. So any instinct that I have, any wiring even from God isn't really from God. It's all wrong. It's all bad. It's all, we gotta just, you wind up in sort of an asceticism over this. I don't know if any of you have seen this. You raise your hand. Tell me if you've seen what I'm talking about here. And so I think that Stephen's corrective is really important. So let's read it. And he is not drawing a lot from Scripture. He says that in his book. He's drawing from theologians. But a lot of these are theologians steeped in the Bible. And Calvin's one of them here. I'm going to read. Story time with John. The fall of man led to total depravity. In the 20th century especially, there's been considerable confusion, even in the Reformed world, over what this means. Total is not to be conflated with utter depravity, as if sinful man sins in every respect. Rather, sin affects every aspect of man's being, his intellect, will, desires, heart, etc. Corruption is thorough. But the Reformed doctrine of sin, as classically stated, did not assert the doctrine of natura delita. I don't know if my Latin's that good. As several Roman Catholic authors have alleged about Reformed doctrine. Now let me stop here for a minute, because I just thought of something else. This is something that you hear a lot with the woke crowd when you say, where's systemic racism? What are you talking about? Systemic racism. And they'll say, well, of course there's systemic racism. Don't you believe in the depravity of man? Do you believe in total depravity? I thought you were a Calvinist. I thought you were Reformed. If you're Reformed, you have to believe in total depravity. And if you believe in total depravity, you have to believe in systemic racism, because and I've listened to this and I thought, like, what does that mean? Like, is there systemic pedophilia? Is there systemic, like any sin, insert the sin, because it's like, because we're all corrupt, the doctrine of total depravity isn't that you are all guilty of every sin and as corrupt as you can possibly be. And that's not what it is. But the woke people have taken advantage, I think, of this misunderstanding. So we shall go on. That is, no Reformed theologian claimed that the fall of man separated man, listen to this, entirely from knowledge of the natural law and the ability to perform it. Nor did man lose the facility of reason or even civil virtue. Indeed, the Reformed doctrine of sin as articulated by post-Reformation Reformed theologians is not unlike that of Roman Catholic Thomists. Recall that we distinguish the two specific, and by the way, he's footnoted all this stuff. You click on any of this, well, in theory, I'm supposed to be able to click on this and get a footnote. There we go. It's very well cited. Recall, he says, that we distinguish the two species of gifts that God gave to man, natural and supernatural, or perhaps better put, constitutive and perfective gifts. Okay, so he's already worked through a categorization distinction in the book. Now, Neil's posting from the introduction. He hasn't gotten to this point. This is why I think it's not wise to do this. And I would read the whole book, which I did. So as soon as I saw the quote, I was like, Neil's not, he doesn't get it. And the people that are posting in ignorance that haven't read the book, they haven't gotten to the section where Stephen explains this stuff. He's making category distinctions that Reformed theologians have made. This is what he says. I said that the former, i.e. reason, body, understanding, are essential to man as man and principally concern earthly things. The perfective gifts are not essential to man as such, but necessary for his perfection and his knowledge of or desire for and ability to strive after eternal life and to worship God rightly in the heart. These latter gifts are primarily inward, since they provide the ability to perform theological good, a good conscience before God in all one's works. These are the highest gifts in the principal part of the divine image. The two sets of gifts were necessary for man to be righteous in both his being and his actions. Hence, the loss of the perfective gifts alone makes man unrighteous in being and worthy of condemnation. Now, what's he saying here? This is the two kingdoms, the classical or the Protestant two kingdoms distinction, not the Escondido stuff. The classical two kingdoms distinction is what he's making here. He's saying there's an inward and outward part of man. Visible and invisible church, temporal world and eternal world. And these are distinctions that are made in that scheme. And there's a lot of theology to back this up. It might be surprising, he says, to recover that Reformed theologians, including Calvin, affirm that man lost only the supernatural gifts at the fall. The natural gifts were corrupted but not lost. Calvin writes, for example, and I'm going to give you examples of this in a minute, so just hang with me. Calvin writes, for example, that man's natural gifts were corrupted by sin and his supernatural gifts withdrawn, meaning by supernatural gifts, the light of faith and righteousness, which would have been sufficient for the attainment of heavenly life and everlasting felicity. The devastation of the fall is found in man's inability to worship God in heart to attain his ultimate heavenly end. Man can no longer choose spiritual things or achieve theological good. He can no longer perfect outward action with proper inward spiritual obedience. Man lost his chief good, the divine image that ensured his righteousness and holiness. So he's quoting Jonathan Edwards here. He quotes Calvin. Here's what Calvin says. The natural or constitutive gifts remain, though corrupted, because such gifts could not be polluted in themselves, states Calvin. Indeed, reason, this is quoting Calvin, reason by which man discerns good and evil and by which he understands and judges is a natural gift. So it could not be entirely destroyed by the fall. Turretin argues that in losing original righteousness, nature indeed remains mutilated and depraved, but is not destroyed as to essence. And he goes on, he quotes a number of other theologians, and I think they're pretty much all Reformed. So what does this all mean, John? Get to the beef. Well, here's the beef of it, guys. Even the unrighteous dads, fathers, even the ones who aren't regenerate, when their sons ask them for a fish, do they give them a snake? That's what he's getting at here. When a mother has a child, if that mother is not redeemed, is the mother's heart naturally inclined towards the child? Yes, it is. And the mothers who murder their children, there's a special category for that. Even in the world who doesn't know Christ personally as their Savior knows there's something twisted about that. There's something different about that. There's something not natural about it. They know that because a mother is maternal. A mother reacts to when her child cries, seeks to comfort, seeks to nurture. There's so many things baked into our nature because God put it there. And we're talking about things that, yes, corrupted, but not destroyed. So, yes, it's very possible for a mother to kill her children. That can happen. Really twisted things can happen. Even though it's not natural for, even though it is natural for even non-Christians to be inclined towards obligations and duties they have in society that they're born into, it doesn't mean they're all going to do it. And those who do those things, when they do them, when a mother, let's say, feeds her children, and it's a beautiful thing and it's a good thing, even if they're not a Christian, what's the motive of their heart? Are they worshiping God? Are they acknowledging God? Are they thanking God? Are they in a right relationship with God as they're doing this? Or are they just enjoying his blessings without gratitude? Well, that becomes a problem. And that's where total depravity comes in. That, yes, in one sense, in a very important sense, it's the difference between heaven and hell. In a very important sense, even the quote-unquote good people are on their way to judgment if they do not have Jesus Christ as a substitute in their place, because even their righteous deeds are filthy rags. But filthy rags in what sense? In a spiritual sense. They're not right with God. And so if you make this distinction, things make sense. And that's Stephen Wolf's point, and that's the point of the theologians he's quoting here, including Calvin, that you must make a distinction. There aren't these natural, there's natural gifts, there's supernatural. And when man fell, what was marred? Did man cease to protect his own? When maybe some men did, but it took steps of depravity to get there. So Romans 1, I think, even sheds some light on this to some extent, in that there are truth suppressors, and there's a gradation of it. So you go deeper and deeper into depravity the more you suppress the truth. But there is a knowledge of God. There is a conscience of some kind that men have. And there is a creation design that we have in us. And so there's certain things we know. And we are capable of acting on the behalf of our good. We're capable, and one of the most basic instincts Stephen talks about in the book, if you read the book, you should read the book, but he talks about is the instinct to survive. Is that a good instinct? Yeah, it is. The vast majority of people who aren't Christians have that instinct, don't they? And they operate based on it. They're trying to survive. Now, are they doing it for all the right reasons? No. But they're still doing it. And so so you have to make a distinction. You have to be able to say in one sense it's good, and in another sense the motives behind it perhaps aren't all the time. Or they're incomplete, and that incompleteness is so important that it's the difference between heaven and hell. So if you don't make these distinctions, then you're not going to understand the Protestant doctrine, the Reformed doctrine of total depravity. Now, I'm expecting questions to come in about this one. Let's see. Yes, there's some opinions about Neil Shenvi out there. Wolf is describing a state of nature in Lockean positive terms, not Hobbesian negative terms. I don't know if Stephen would say he's Lockean, but yeah, I would say much more than Locke than Hobbes, for sure. Yeah, because Hobbes definitely, the Leviathan is not in, that whole concept is not in Stephen's wheelhouse at all. Let's see. Neil is so careful to gracious. More. I want to get away from that. I was hoping there would be some questions about total depravity here. Thoughts on recent No Quarter November article related to White Boy Summer and all the fun we had this summer. We did have fun this summer, didn't we? Asking again so it doesn't get buried. Okay, I didn't see the first one. We'll do that. Yeah, so there's a No Quarter November, Doug Wilson's blog, and he wrote a blog today, and I will share the thoughts on that if we have time at the end here. All right, let's keep going. Let's run through this. Man, this is gonna be super mega edition of the Conversations That Matter podcast, but that is okay. All right, where are we going now? Let's do the Al Mohler thing. I'm going to try to run through this stuff a little quicker for you all. I'm going to play for you a clip. I listened to the whole thing, and let me just give you my opinion. Al Mohler did a discussion at Southern Seminary, a discussion of issues facing the SBC 4 days ago. And in this discussion, Al Mohler comes out as the conservative we all knew he was, right? I mean, he's sounding like a conservative, more so than I've ever heard him sound like a conservative. And granted, he's been pretty consistent on the women pastor issue, but he's changing his tune, we'll say, on the side B gay Christianity stuff, for sure. he's coming out. I mean, before it was like you didn't really know where he was at, and there were some things he said that even made you think he was in favor of. I mean, he thought that orientation was somehow, it could be, I don't know if legitimate's the word, but it was something that it wasn't, let's say, as big of a problem as the reparative therapist would have you believe. And so he came out against it. Remember 2014, he came out against reparative therapy and apologized for denying same-sex, actually he called it homosexual orientation. So now, oh man, he's way against side B Christianity and that whole thing. And it's just interesting to see. This is, in my mind, I watching this guy for years, I'm like, this is such a pivot. But he gets to this. And this is kind of like all the conservative sounding things he says. He says this. Listen to this.
Disqualifying.
That's right. They are. I think when you look at this, there are a couple other things just very quickly that need to be said. And one of them is that there has been a wrongful instinct that has become apparent in many evangelical circles. And that wrongful instinct comes down to this. And it's basically what we would define as moralism, which is to say all we have here is a sin that we can understand, and we're going to deal with.
He's talking about abuse, just so you know, sexual abuse in the SPC.
With that, because we understand that sin. So if you have a claim of abuse and they're two unmarried people, there's been a temptation in many evangelical circles to say, well, we don't have a clue what to think about on the abuse angle, but that's sin because they're having sex outside of marriage, and that's all there is to it, and that's the limit of our responsibility. And we now know that is not enough, that there is much more to the situation than that. The question of sexual sin does not disappear. It is still the church's responsibility.
Okay, so there's one category, and that's sexual sin. It's like two people aren't married, and they're committing fornication. That's a sin. So that's one category, but he's saying there's something else here too.
But there is a context of abuse in which, I mean, certain things are, we just begin with the understanding that if you are in authority over someone, then any kind of sexual expression or sexual activity is just absolutely categorically wrong and rightly defined as abuse.
Okay, there it is. If you have authority over someone, then any sexual activity is rightly categorized as abuse. Man, I don't think he'd apply it to this, but I don't know how you don't. I mean, doesn't a husband, according to Scripture, have authority over the wife? So is every time you're intimate with your wife, is it abuse? It makes it abuse because there's authority. What about a female who has authority over a man, maybe a higher rank in the military or a boss at a job and a teacher at a school? The man has strength, though, physical strength, to resist the teacher, but the teacher has the authority. And so what about in that situation? Where's the abuse coming from? It could be the teacher, I suppose, if she's threatening the student or something. But you can see how complicated this gets. And I was looking up, before this, I was looking up legal definitions of abuse and stuff, and none of them match what he's saying. This is new. This is something that I think is coming in from just the milieu, the Me Too stuff. It's the critical theory land in which we live. And the Me Too stuff is promoting this new way to approach it. Now, we can certainly see it. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to obviously figure out, and this predates any of the critical theory stuff, that men are stronger than women, generally speaking. And there's, in fact, the Old Testament law accounts for this. And so when you have a man, let's say, having a sexual relationship with a woman, and there's a difference between the way you treat it in the city versus the country. I mean, these are distinctions made. These are principles given in the Old Testament, in the Mosaic law, for how to treat these things. Because if the woman cries out, and in the city, there's people to hear her, then then it was obviously, it wasn't consensual, or it wasn't. It was fornication. But the way that you tell whether or not it's abuse and whether someone's forcing themselves on someone else is, there's all kinds of tests that are given, and there's no foolproof way. I mean, there's even to the point of giving evidence of if a husband accuses a wife of not being faithful, there's the evidence of virginity shall be presented. There's all these things that are archaic but the principles themselves are everlasting. They're not archaic, or they're I shouldn't say they're everlasting, but they're the principles behind this, though. The moral principles are for today as well. And so I will admit that applying it to our modern situation makes it difficult, but I think you start considering things like, was there any evidence that there was an opportunity and an attempt to resist? Was it reported? You have to look at all these things. So in the case of Jennifer Lyell, we'll say, and was it David? Not David. I can't remember the professor there at Southern Seminary, but there's a professor at Southern Seminary, and Jennifer Lyell was the, I don't know why I thought it was David something. I can't remember the name of the professor. Someone write the name of the professor in the comment section if you remember. Anyway, in that whole situation, which happened at Southern Seminary, David Sills, it was David Sills, you had a situation where it looked like, they're traveling long distances to meet up. It was formerly a student and professor relationship, but he kind of adopted her into the family that he had in an informal way. But then she works for him, and then for a period of years, they're like meeting up at even inconvenient places. I mean, that doesn't match the pattern of abuse necessarily, but it's called abuse because, well, guess what? David had more authority, and because there was more authority, it's necessarily abuse now. That's the new rule. And now Al Mohler is just giving you the principle right here that you're now going to apply to everything. And it's in the context in this conversation of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I have to say, it's one of the worst parts of this whole discussion, because he says that the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention retain their autonomy, that there's no authority that the executive committee has, really other than kicking churches out of the convention. And but then he turns around and he talks about how things are just so bad. The executive committee, the Southern Baptist Convention as a denomination, has to really get this abuse thing right, because it's just such a bad thing, and it's pervasive. He's just going along with the narrative, and it's just not. I mean, at least the numbers we have, it's not. Yeah, does it happen in any big organization? It does, absolutely. And it's horrible that it happens. It's evil and it's wrong. It needs to be punished to the full extent of the law. I'm probably harsher in what I think should happen to people who actually abuse than Al Mohler is. I mean, I would be harsher on people who I think have adultery than Al Mohler probably is. But I don't think it's like this systemic thing that is so pervasive in the Southern Baptist Convention as opposed to other denominations or other organizations. It's just not. And what's the purpose of making it such a big deal and then applying a standard like this? Well, if you apply a standard like this, then you're able to take a situation like Jennifer Lyell, and she becomes a perpetual victim, and you're able to grandstand and white knight and all those things and make yourself feel good, and these people become political pawns in the South. I mean, I think, and I'm not saying they're only political pawns. I'm not saying they're political pawns. I'm just saying that you do the caring well stuff, and you treat these people as political pawns. All the reforms, quote unquote, we want for this denomination have to happen because guess what? That person says they do, and they were abused. Rather than opening the Word of God, saying, well, what does the Word of God say? What can we actually do? What's physically possible? So Mohler is, if he's woke on anything, it's this abuse stuff. Guarantee it. And it just came out the other day, just a few days ago. Paul B., did it continue for years with Jennifer Lyell? Yeah, that is my understanding, is it did. I mean, the relationship was for years, and yes, and it was multiple times meeting up at locations. I mean, it was a while. You go watch my video I did on explaining that whole situation, and I remember reading through a lot of stuff on it. Okay, let's see. I hope I think Mohler actually has retracted his statements on reparative therapy, believe it or not. No, he never did. Sorry, he never retracted them. He just kind of contradicted them. That's how it works. Okay. Let's do this. I'm going to give you 2 tidbits here real quick, updates I want to share with you. First is on thebaptistmessage.com, and they're reporting that in the McCraney case, for those who don't know, I won't be long. For those who do know, you know what I'm talking about already. Will McCraney versus the North American Mission Board. They've had some witnesses or some testimony come out in the case. It's not looking good for NAM right now. And McCraney's attorneys revealed sworn statements from Scott Thomas, president of the Safari Christian Business Alliance, a faith-based networking, media, and education company headquartered in New Mexico, and Jimmy Crosby, president of the Jacksonville Baptist Theological Seminary, with both stating they denied employment to McCraney because of statements attributed to NAM. Now, this is interesting. McCraney's been alleging this for years in this whole case. It's look, Kevin Ezell went after me, tried to get me, or I guess got him fired. Now I'm trying to remember. He's been on my show twice. I think, yes, got him fired. But then prevented him from getting another job. And this is totally outside the bounds. I mean, it wasn't even, he was working for the Maryland-Delaware Convention. It's not even supposed to be, at the time he was there, part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but NAM is acting like they are. And remember, this is the one where they filed a brief, ERLC filed a brief saying that the Southern Baptist Convention is a hierarchy, and these local state conventions basically answer to the Southern Baptist Convention. It was so weird. So anyway, now testimonies coming out backing up what McCraney has said all along, that yes, potential employees are saying we didn't hire him because basically Kevin Ezell, North American Mission Board, told us a story about him, and it deterred us from doing that, which is what he's not supposed to do. He's hurting someone else. And for what purpose? For what purpose? So for those who are paying attention to that, I mean, this is one of the big things. If they can get some exploration here into the North American Mission Board, they might be able to uncover a lot of other things as well. But this is probably the best shot for Southern Baptists who want reform, is this case. And I'm surprised it's not talked about more, but it is important. So I figured I'd just give you a little bit of an update there. And then, of course, I'm going to put this in the info section later, but savegrovecity.com. I'm going to try to remember to. savegrovecity.com. There is a petition there, 368 signatures. I would encourage you to go sign this. Grove City, if you haven't been paying attention to that whole issue, I mean, it has just been kicking the can down the road forever on this critical race theory stuff. Grove City College has yet to actually really, the administration has yet to apologize. I mean, the way they've handled this has been so terrible. Snubbing the board, it's just, you've heard it here on the podcast before, but I just want to let you know, there's a summary here of what's going on and at Grove City College, what's happened thus far. And there's basically at the end of it says, we're deeply concerned about the college's conservative heritage. We want to see it flourish. We've come to believe that the solution requires leadership change. They want to fire President McNulty. That's the bottom line here. And so I would encourage you, I think it's necessary. There's no way to get, I think, anything done at Grove City College that's less than or more than symbolic without firing McNulty. So I would go to savegrovecity.com and sign it if you care about Christian education. Even if you conserve, I mean, this is supposed to be a conservative Christian college. And the way that they've handled this has been terrible. Okay. No one's been fired. No punishment. Slaps on the wrist. Let's now... Okay, last but not least. That was my last topic, but someone... I'm going to go to the comments here. Someone did ask about the... the white boy summer stuff. Okay, so let's just go to that real quick. This is... I'm going to have to probably... Let's see here. Look up Doug Wilson's blog. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I did go over this. Is this it? Yes.
Welcome to Douglas Wilson.
That's not what I wanted. Blog. I think it's... Is this it? Yes. All right. I don't want to read this whole thing. This wasn't on the agenda today, but Doug Wilson put this out, and it's confusing. It's a little bit confusing in some ways, I think, to some people out there. What I think what's going on is, so the guys at this is like the second or third blog that's similar to this one. The guys at I guess Canon Press, Doug Wilson, that whole Moscow, I guess they say. They published Stephen Wilson's book. Stephen Wilson. I just combined the two. Stephen Wolf's book, Case for Christian Nationalism. And I think if you look at what Doug Wilson has written about this, there seems to be a bit of an admission or a thought that book could be used to smear. That people will look at that book and think that there's racism under the hood. That's really been, in fact, right now, that's the line of attack on Twitter, from what I understand. Even someone trying to get William Wolfe fired because he endorsed Stephen Wolfe's book. And William Wolfe works at Southern Seminary, and at least he's an intern there. And so it's on the basis of the fact that in their minds, the book's racist. The book is against interracial marriage or something. And we've talked about that a little bit on this podcast. And I asked Stephen these questions that hopefully help clear that up for some of you. You got to be careful with a book of this size. You need to try to understand it. You just do. I'm a big fan of that, trying to understand before just lashing out online, which unfortunately a lot of people just lash out without understanding something. This is a very carefully worded book. Anyway, I think what's happening though is there's an awareness that that there are people out there who are going to make that accusation, and there are people out there who actually are against interracial marriage, that actually do think that there's a conspiracy that the Jews might be behind, or you've seen what Kanye West has been saying recently and stuff, and a sensitivity to the fact that maybe these two things could be conflated. Maybe, look, we published this book here, and people are putting it in the category of, Kanye West will say they're saying that it's just like that. Or they're putting it of kinist is the other word that's used here, which frankly is, I know Doug Wilson wanted to retire the word racist, but I think it's probably better for him to retire the word kinist, because no one knows what that means, even worse than racist. But so I think there's a hedging of like, let's hedge against that kind of a accusation. And by the way to do it is to write articles or blogs like this. And so I'll read you a few little things from this and give you my thoughts on just we can't read the whole thing. It's just too long. But White Boy Bummer. Now, I've explained it to you before. White Boy Summer is all it is. It's not, so I don't know why. The people who understand it the least seem to be the most intent on defining it sometimes. I've seen, at least on Facebook. It is. And from the people I know who like to post the memes. It's memes, right? But it's a celebration in the midst of a sea of white men being eviscerated in the public eye. Turn on your television and look at all the commercials, and like, where is there any positive example of a white man, a white masculine figure? You're not going to find it. It's a total overnight evisceration of white men, and it's crowding the calendar. It's putting new holidays, new observances, and it's all it's everything. But if it's a white man, if it's Christopher Columbus, we got to make it Indigenous Persons Day. If you got the 4th of July, we gotta have Juneteenth. We gotta make a big deal about that, and maybe take away some of that thunder. Black History Month, Pride Month, Hispanic American Month, and I can't keep track of all of it. So in this calendar, and it's been going on for years, but it's just heightened more lately. And not just the calendar, but everywhere else in society, white men being under attack in a way, or at least being the assumption being that they are somehow responsible for the sins of the country or of the world. White Boy Summer is just, I think, a very positive way that some people, and many of them I don't even think are white, came out and said, you know what? There's some good things about some white people. white men, some good things about them. And one of the good things about them is, you know what, they have some things they'd like to do in the summer, some hobbies, some activities that they engage in that they're pretty good at. And that's true. They're, water skiing and fishing and I don't know, whatever else, a lot of water sports. I mean, swimming. I mean, that's, turn on the Olympics and who's competing in the swimming? I mean, it looks pasty. I'm just saying. So it was a way to celebrate. These are some positive things about white boys, and we can have fun doing it. And that's all I think it ever was. And people trying to read into it all these other things, it's embarrassing to me, because I'm just thinking, like, where are you getting this? You're bringing all these assumptions to the table. You're not actually like talking to the people who have, at least the people I know of that are friends on Facebook and stuff, who have been promoting that. So here's some of the things Doug Wilson says. Let us start with the usual suspects. These are folks who have completely, well, I should probably start before that. He says, some might want me to begin today's installment of No Quarter November, that's his blog series this month, by avowing that November's goal is to not to attack everybody as though I were trying to start a reform version of Festivus or something. I am going to attack everybody, at least everybody I can think of that has anything whatever to do with whiteness and its adjacent sins. What a pasty, pale excuse for a foundational ethnic identity. A color, that's it? If you wanted something like that, you should at least have gone for emerald green. That might have been something worth a preen or two, but no. Okay, I think he's just trying to be humorous. Let us start with the usual suspects. These are folks who have completely fallen for the progressive play that is being run on them. That play will be described more fully in the next section, but for the present, let us merely say that they have fallen for a ploy that makes them think that we conservatives somehow want the third string to run out on the court at the opening of the championship game. The material they have been reading makes them think that third string and coach are synonymous. The third string are those who take the natural affection for their own people. That no sensible man ever doubted was a good thing. Hook it to a bicycle pump and inflate it to cringe levels. Bracing for the pop. They talk much about love and soil and affection and heritage, and their chief characteristic is crackling envy aimed at anybody who is smarter, wealthier, has a better-looking wife, is more influential, or is better connected than they are. And after just a couple of days marinating in that attitude, they start talking ominously about the Jews. Now, here's my conundrum in this. When I was reading that, I have no clue. I'm like, I don't know who he's talking about here. Then I saw right under that, literally under this paragraph, is a screenshot. And it's from a guy named Jesse Vandermolen. Now, I've met Jesse Vandermolen in person twice, I believe, in Iowa. Both times, I think, we're in Iowa at events that Enemies Within the Church was doing. Enemies Within the Church stuff. Jesse Vandermolen was, I can't remember all the circumstances. One was a conference, and I met him there. I think that's where I first met him. I haven't spent a lot of time with him, but I know him from that. I met him, and we are Facebook friends. Doesn't mean I see every one of his posts at all. But anyway, Doug Wilson screenshots a post. I guess it's from Twitter, so I wouldn't have even seen it because I'm not on Twitter. But it's it's a repost of someone saying conservatives wonder why you get called Nazi. It's because there was once a group of people in Germany who are also against Marxism, globalism, queer theory, transgenderism, pedophilia, and degeneracy, a group who wanted to promote traditional values and nationalism. The difference is this group didn't call the people destroying German society their greatest ally, which I think is referring to Israel. And then whoever, Christ is Lord, I guess, is the account that posted this. And then Jesse, he just reposts it and says yes, either on Facebook or Twitter. I'm not sure. It looks like it's a Twitter screenshot. Okay, so that's got to be one of the people that he's talking about here. Now, I'm not sure exactly. I can't get in Jesse's head. I don't know why he posted that. I don't know what he was thinking exactly. Personally, I would not have posted that. I don't really, I don't know. I don't agree with the sentiment. I think that that post is trying to get at. Did the Weimar Republic have some serious issues? Yeah, it did. Was Berlin decadent? Yes, it was. Were there things that the Nazis, when they came into power, said that they were going to fix that were actual problems? Well, they wouldn't have gotten into power unless there were actual problems that they claimed to have fixed. That being said, Nazis were still bad guys, all right? And I don't know that Jesse's even saying that they're good guys. It's hard to read into this too much. But would I have posted it? No, because I can see the impression it gives. That's not the issue though here. Here's the issue. Here's the thing that, so I'm reading this and this paragraph comes up, and as I'm reading it, I'm thinking like, okay, I don't know, who is he talking about? I don't know anyone who's talking about blood and soil and then their affection and heritage, but their chief characteristic here, this is the important thing here. This is the key. Their chief characteristic is crackling envy aimed at anybody who is smarter, wealthier, has a better looking wife, is more influential, or is better concerned than they are. And they start talking about the Jews. And I'm like, but apparently he's got to be talking about people like Jesse here, I guess. And the posts I have seen of Jesse, he loves his wife. He has children. They're Dutch, I think. I mean, Vandermolen. I've seen them even, I think, put picture. That's what, my Facebook always gives you the pictures. I don't know if your Facebook algorithms do that, but I get to see all the pictures. So if someone posts a picture of their family, boom, I see it. So I saw a picture of him and his family in like the Dutch, traditional Dutch dress, wooden shoes. And I'm just like, I don't, has a better looking wife. I mean, this guy's, he loves the way his wife looks. This is what I don't get is why torch these people? All right. I'm leading to something. I wasn't planning on talking about this, so I don't have anything that's fully, I'm kind of spitballing a bit here, but I do have somewhere I'm leading with this. Okay, we of course reject all ethnic pufferys, and we do so with just the right amount of loathing, not so much loathing as to betray insecurity, and not so little as to hint that we might be harboring some secret affinity for any of that white pride foolishness. If we attacked it with loud shouts of alarm, that would do nothing except telegraph fear, like Trump attacking DeSantis or something. There's a real temptation here, and you need to know that I'm resisting it manfully because I know how it would look. I don't know, I mean, it reminds me of someone, though, who says, like, man, I could attack you. I could really go after you. In fact, I'm going to post a screenshot. Here you are. I could really, but I'm not going to do it because, like, what is that? You're doing it. I don't know. That's maybe I'm missing something. If I'm missing something, you put it in the info section. I will apologize. I don't think I am though. It's, or in the comment section rather. All right. So he goes on. Because ethnic vainglory is like a swollen and misshapen souffle. And so the impulses to attack it with a cricket bat are unrelenting and fierce, but I stand firm. Yeah, and I'd have to search the Doug Wilson archive to know what he means by ethnic vainglory, because I don't really know what he means by that. Like, if I'm proud of who I am, my ancestry will say, and I'm proud of, in fact, I'll use an example. I was looking the other day at plane tickets, and there's an airport near me, a new airline, and they got cheap tickets going to Scotland and to England. And I'm like, I would love to do that. There's a Harris Island. They probably call it Harry's, but it's Harris. In Scotland, there's castles that would trace back to my family. My mom's maiden name is Carey. There's a Carey Castle. Man, I would love to go back. And why? Why would I do that? Because I have a connection. There's a connection there. And I hope that wouldn't be, and I don't think Doug Wilson would say it is, ethnic vainglory. It's not genetic determinism. I'm not saying like, everything about me is genetics, but I think anyone would do that. I was talking to a friend the other day who has roots going back to Germany and Africa, and he'd love to go to both places. And I think that's awesome. I would love for him to go. I really would. And if I could pay for everyone to go, I would do it, because I think it's so fulfilling. And I think that's part of the natural identity that God's given us. And the genetics are part of it in so much as when I look in the mirror, I see my mom and dad. And I don't only see my mom and dad. I see their moms and dads and their moms and dads and their moms and dads. But what people know when they look at me, whose kid I am, right? That's, every kid has that when they're running around in church or wherever. People know, oh, I know who you belong to. And there's something special about that. That's an identity thing. And that's, and so that's what I would want to, just in the day and age in which we live, where racism is thrown around so much and torched so much, I would just want to be very careful about making that distinction that it is okay to like who you are. It is. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with wanting to even marry someone. If someone wants to call me a racist for this, whatever. I know I'm not, in the sense that racism is hating the traditional use of the term that I grew up with, hating people of other races or ethnicities. I'm not, obviously, and people who know me know that's not true one bit. But if someone, no matter who they are, wants to marry someone who is part of their or closer to their ethnic group, and that's one of their tastes, I don't see the problem with that. I don't. And I think there's beauty in every ethnicity, but I don't see. I wouldn't call that like ethnic vainglory. So when it's not defined too well, I don't know what to say. It's just and I think if you read this article, it's a bit vague. So anyway, let's see. But I mean, he says a lot of good things too. But and there's some funny things and stuff. Okay, here's what I'm leading to, though. Yeah, I don't think we're going to read more of this particular article. And again, I've said this before. And he brings up Stephen Wolf's book, which is interesting because I think that's why part of this is happening. In part, I think it's to hedge against people who are going after Stephen Wolf's books incessantly on Twitter. Do you think they planned for that? Do you think they expected that? Probably not. I don't know. But people hate Stephen Wolf's book, and they're calling it all kinds of racism, etc. So maybe this is something that you can point to if you're in Moscow, and you can say, look, this is Doug Wilson posted this. We're not that. So yes, we published Stephen Wolf's book, but we're not what you're saying. That probably is an advantage. Okay, so the Christ is Lord. Someone's just pointed out to me the Christ is Lord handle is Andrew Torba. Okay, well, that makes sense now. I didn't know who that was. So someone actually texted me this morning. I should just let you know about this. Okay. Someone who is connected to Andrew Torba somehow. I don't know how, but they sent me a screenshot of a conversation between them. And Andrew Torba apparently is saying that he doesn't necessarily agree with those sentiments. He just reposted it because it was an interesting thought piece. And he... in fact, I could read it to you if people. Let me just do that. If people are interested, I will read it to you. I have the screenshots. This is what Andrew Torba said about that particular quote. I share stuff that makes people question their assumptions. I added zero affirming or disapproving commentary to the post. I just shared it. It looks like Jesse affirmed it, which it seems is what Doug is attacking. Saying someone has cotton candy for brains isn't an argument against what the post said. The same people who were pushing this stuff in Weimar are pushing it here today. These are facts. Facts don't care about feelings. Nazis were, of course, not good. They were a pagan, non-Christian reactionary movement that was the response to the Jewish Bolsheviks, pushing the same things they are pushing on us today. We want Christian nationalism, and in particular, the gospel to be our response, not Gnostic, esoteric, pagan, bloodthirsty ethno-nationalism. Something is going to fill the neo-reactionary void to this stuff. And so pointing out the parallels between them and then and now is a warning, not an endorsement. Now this is interesting. That's Andrew Torba. Andrew Torba, I don't even know how there's a connection here, but someone I know asked Andrew Torba, why did you post that? That's what Andrew Torba said. And it could be that Jesse's saying the same thing. I don't know. I haven't asked Jesse. But this was the opportunity to go after maybe low-hanging fruit, and that would appear to be racist. And so there's too much I'm ignorant on in the minds of people like Jesse to really weigh in much more than this. But I will say that as a rule of thumb, when there's an accusation of racism of any kind, I always give a benefit of the doubt. If I don't have the evidence in front of me, I give the benefit of the doubt, because I've lived since I've been at Southeastern, well, before that, in Secular Academy, I've been in a situation of constantly hearing accusations about racism, and most of the time, it's a big nothing burger. And so I just want to caution everyone with being careful about this. Okay, here's what I was leading up to. A few years ago, actually now it's 2016, it's more than a few years ago, there was an individual I met, and I'm not going to say his name, but he said he was basically part of the alt-right, kind of a Richard Spencer fan, and came to a college career group that I happened to lead, a Bible study. And I had the opportunity to lead him to the Lord. And this particular individual, we'll just say, had some identity issues, I think. And one of the things that drew him to that, the same thing that draws people to, I think, to the woke side, is a fulfillment of identity. We'll tell you who you really are. You're white, and you're German, or whatever, and taking something that actually is good and true, but making that everything, and not taking into account the other things that make you who you are. So anyway, he became a Christian, and that when he had a Christian identity, it's not like now he's not white or all of a sudden he learned. This is what happened. I saw this transformation. He learned to be proud of who he was, and not in a way that he hated other people or didn't like other people or wanted to get rid of other people. Or he learned, though, to be happy with who he was within the boundaries of what God's ethics taught. And I didn't have to go to him and torch him to do any of that. I didn't have to just make fun of him or I treated him like a person, and he was, I would say he's a political ally at this point, but not just that, a brother in Christ. And there was just, an experience of this guy was of a young man who had been through, especially if you hold beliefs like Richard Spencer's, who had been through social castigation for a long time, for years, up through his high school years, maybe even before that. And he was shunned. And it kind of left him isolated. And if I would have torched him like other people did, it would have just made him more ingrained, more bitter, more bunker-like. He wouldn't have. It would have just made him crawl into a shell. And who knows? Maybe those are the kind of people that eventually do get violent. I don't know. I don't know where he would have gone. But I didn't do that. And I'm not trying to put I know it sounds like I'm making myself the hero of the story, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying, in my own experience, I've just found that it's better to, and this would apply to God resists the proud, gives grace to the humble. So exercise that principle here. This guy was humble. I think that applies to social justice warriors. If they're humble, I think you treat them the same way. I don't think it's different, but they are looking for something. They're looking for an identity. They don't have one, and they're finding it in this junky place that's just not giving them what they really need. And they're turning to bitterness, and it's unfulfilling. It's dumb. It's just, that's my assessment. And I have a lot of hope. I think I have a heart for the people in those positions because of that experience in part. And I want to be there to help them. I don't want to misunderstand them, torch them, and especially, make fun of them, like questioning their motives and saying, what's really going on with them is they're jealous of people with better looking wives. That's where I can't, guys. I can't. So I say it with respect, and I've said this before. I would say 95% of the things Doug Wilson says about political things, especially, or social things, the vast majority, I would say, that I've read at least, I would say I'm with him. I've defended Doug Wilson's political views and social views on this podcast, probably almost more than anyone else, maybe except John MacArthur. I don't know. I mean, both of them. They tend to get things right on the political, social front more than 99% of the other elite pastors out there, or pastors with platforms. So I say that I say this with a measure of respect, but I definitely don't understand this one. And we all have bad days. I've had bad days on the podcast. So I would hope that at the end of the day, there might be an apology or a retraction or something. Or if I've totally missed the boat on this, I don't think I have, but if I have, I will retract or apologize. So let's see what the comments are saying. Maybe the corrective for me will be in there, but yeah, we got stuff about Grove City. Yeah, Grove City loses either way. Yeah, they probably do. Sky Jathani said a while ago that no one there had a spine because, according to him, they gave so much ground to conservatives. Really? Are you serious? That shows where the Phil Vischer crowd is. My goodness. Like, no, I'd say the other way around. They've conceded to the left. Remember, this is a college that is conservative. That's the default setting. That's how they started. They don't take federal money, and yet they're having these problems with critical theory. It's weird. Patrick wrote a competing book, and Wolf's book was doing better. Sounds like sour grapes to me. Yeah, maybe. Kanye is right, though. Kanye is right about what? What is Kanye right about? John, the Christ is Lord handles. Oh yeah, I already read that. Okay. Oh man, there's so many people. I'm trying to get to the comments and questions. Here's a question on this subject: would you agree with Doug Wilson that the South's moral position pre-Civil War is indefensible, or is it too complicated to answer? Wait, hold on. What, Doug Wilson says that the South's moral position pre-Civil War is indefensible? Where in the world does Doug Wilson say that? I thought Doug Wilson. I've read stuff that Doug Wilson said about. I'm pretty sure he doesn't say that, but maybe he's changed his position. I didn't think so. I really did not think. I think you might be reading Doug Wilson wrong, or else I'm just not updated. I mean, I don't know. That's too general of a question. It's too hard for me to answer that. I would love to engage on that in another podcast, perhaps. If you're talking about like their constitutional interpretation of whether states can secede or not, no, I think from the beginning, I believe in, they call it compact theory. I think it's just compact fact. I believe in that. I totally believe that the founding generation would not have conceived of the United States being the Hotel California. I mean, even some of the states in their ratification papers, like New York did this. There's 3 states that did it, I think. Virginia did it. They basically said, we can leave. So it wasn't something that even needed to be enumerated, because the 10th Amendment says the powers are reserved to the states that aren't given to the the national government, common general government. So secession would be part of that. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but I don't want to bore everyone. I think that on that issue, I mean, New England tried to do it, or attempted to consider doing it with the Hartford Convention. So yeah, I mean, I think that position, that political position, I would say rock solid. We should be thinking about that more with what's going on politically out there. I'm shielding my eyes from what's happening with Kerry Lake in Arizona. I can't take it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So some people, it is no quarter of November. Also, you specifically avoid any kind of qualifying language. Okay. Well, I don't know all the rules on all this stuff. I know you burn couches for no quarter of November. I mean, I remember the first no quarter of November, and I didn't quite get the rules. So I was like, okay, so you're not, like, don't you usually write without qualification? But it's even more so. Yeah, but I still have to like take the words to what they mean in English. I don't know. I don't get it. I'm more, see, if people read my stuff, it's much more, it's less stream of consciousness. It tends to be, and more, here are the facts. I do stream of consciousness on the podcast, but I think Doug tends to write, Pastor Wilson, I'll say, tends to write more stream of consciousness. And there's a certain art to it. It's like that you can literally laugh through like one of his articles sometimes, because he's making all these descriptions and just references that you weren't expecting. I don't know if I could do that. That would be it'd take me a long time to construct something like that, and he probably just whips it out. So good for him on that. But I do think English, when you're writing in English, you still have to just take into account if you're writing to a particular audience. Like I'm speaking to you right now, and I know in general what my audience is thinking. At least I know from doing this over time, experience has taught me who listens, and I take that into account when I say what I'm saying. So I do make qualifications. Sometimes I don't though, because I know who's listening, and I know I don't have to. So it takes wisdom. There's no doubt about it. It takes wisdom. White boy summer is unstoppable. I don't know. It's pretty cold where I am. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it stopped. Let's see. Wilson attacked white boy summer during winter. What would you call a person that hunts and kills a bear during hibernation? Never mind. I'm just saying this week. That's right. All the white boy summer people went home. Doug calling the faithful fathers of families in. Yeah. I know there's some people getting on about Doug Wilson. Look, I'm not meaning to stir up hate against him because of this at all, man. And if I was someone doing political calculations, I never would have said anything, because I'm probably shutting myself off to anyone in that orbit. Perhaps anyone who's loyal to Wilson's probably going to be upset. But it's not personal. Again, I would welcome criticism of myself if I did something like this. I really do believe we should treat others the way we want to be treated. And I would totally want someone to, if I did something publicly like this, I would not mind at all if someone came after me and gave me that opportunity to think through it and say, you know what, maybe I should have phrased that differently. I'm going to retract or apologize or whatever. So this wasn't a private thing. It was a public thing. So, all right. So we're going to end it, I think, there. I'm uncomfortable with this podcast. It went in a lot of different directions, but hopefully it was helpful for you guys. We touched a lot of different issues today, and I'm going to come up with some things. I am working on some things for later in the week that are going to be, I think, a lot more contained, less what this is, less long-form conversation, more of some presentations. So look forward to that. We'll see what happens. It's hunting season this week, too, and I'm speaking. Oh, I'm speaking. Almost forgot. All right, last thing but not least. If you live around the Albany area of New York State, then I'd love to see you this particular Saturday, and the website's not loading. It's loading slow. I'm going to be speaking, where am I going to be speaking? There it is, Schenectady, New York, November 18th, Calvary OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian. The Presbyterians are letting me come in and speak about social justice, 6:30 p.m. I'll see you there. You can RSVP at calvaryconference@outlook.com. God bless.